G'day and welcome to another video with Better Pics. Hope this finds everyone well. Just showing a sample edit today of an image that I photographed in the Nepalese Himalaya a couple of years ago now. The backstory to this trip was I was working with an organisation in Sydney called Eyes for Everest, and they do some fantastic volunteer work in various parts of Nepal. Basically, they're a group of, or each year, several groups of volunteer optometrists pack up a bunch of equipment and go to Nepal, up in the mountains, and where there's little to no optometry services for people. And they do a bunch of testing on people's eyes and establish exactly what treatment or glasses, for example, people need, and they then at hugely reduced prices organise either scripts for people to go and see specialists in Kathmandu, or they send them back glasses so that they're helping people who have poor eyesight deal with that issue. So the great organisation doing some fantastic work, so definitely check them out. So I was contracted to go with them. I've been to Nepal several times and been on and run several expeditions, and I was brought on board as the photographer and videographer to document their journey and the work that they were doing. So, and of course, being out in the mountains, I had a bit of time to photograph the mountains, which is obviously a great passion of mine. And this particular image in the Everest region is a mountain called Pumori, which translates to Daughter Peak of Everest. It's at the end of the valley where Everest Base Camp is on the Nepal side. And it's a beautiful mountain, as you can see. And on this particular day, it was quite amazing, the view that we had from a little village called Lobajé. And a bit of cloud rolling through, framed with the rock and ground in the foreground there, and this peak was just stunning. So I quickly snapped some images, and we're going to do a bit of a different edit today for the sort of work that I normally do. I'm going to convert this image to black and white, and as you can probably see by the example in the thumbnail and at the beginning of the video, and we're going to go through that process. So let's get into it. Alright, so I'm going to start just by making some general adjustments to this image. When I started editing this image originally, I really didn't have a specific plan of attack. I started just editing in colour, which you can see I've just made some adjustments there in colour, and I really didn't have a bit of vision around what I wanted to do with this image, so I just thought I'd let the editing process play out the way that it did, and go from there. So I'm going to convert over to black and white in Lightroom. Obviously that allows me to have all of the flexibility of still working with the raw image, but in a monochrome. So let's continue on. So I've added quite a bit of contrast there, and I'm just going to drop the exposure a little bit further. I've dropped the highlights because I want to maintain all the beautiful detail that is in that mountain, as you can see, but with dropping of the overall exposure and the highlights, you can see it's a little bit dark in the foreground there, so I'm just going to bring up the shadows a tiny bit, and that's helped a little bit, but I'll probably visit, as I normally do, with some selective adjusting by using the paintbrush tool a little bit further down the track. So that's we're underway. That's kind of giving me some definite steps towards what I want to do with the image. I'm just going to give it a little bit of clarity and a tiny bit of dehaze. But what I'm now going to do is go down to the black and white mix. Now, this would normally be HSL, so hue, saturation, luminance, but obviously working with a black and white image, we simply have the adjustments within the constraints of it being black and white. So you're obviously not going to work on hue because that's a color adjustment. You're obviously not going to work on saturation because that's a color adjustment. But we are going to work on the equivalent of luminance, which is brightness, which we can absolutely work on within a black and white image. So the main thing that I wanted to achieve by looking at these adjustments is to darken the blue parts of the image, which is the majority of the sky that's coming through there. Obviously there's clouds, so some of it's a little bit sort of blocked off, but there is quite a bit of blue in that area of the image. And by dropping that blue slider, it just allows me to take control of that sky just a little bit there. Alright, so let's just go down a little bit further. I just want to apply a little bit of sharpening, and I'm going to definitely mask the sharpening that's been applied, because there's lots of beautiful soft tones that I don't want the sharpening to affect. So I'm just going to increase that. There we go. Yep, that's great. Alright, and this image was originally shot at, let's have a look, ISO 200, 135mm at f8, 6/40th of a second. Not really needing any noise reduction there, but just worth looking at to make sure. Alright, so I'm really happy with where that's at the moment, and I'm actually happy with the framing as well. There is always the potential that you can play with the cropping of an image in post, and absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I'm pretty happy with where the framing's at, particularly because my intention is to draw down or darken the outer parts of the image just to really give a solid focus on the mountain at the center of the image. Now, absolutely at the moment the focus is on the mountain, no question there at all, but I just want to make sure that, I guess that's the approach I want to take ultimately. I just want to darken down the outside of the image that little bit more, just to really help solidify the mountain as the subject and keep it framed really solid on that mountain. So what I'm going to do is pop up to our tools up the top here. So we've got a few there. There's crop overlay, spot removal, red eye reduction, or correction I should say. We definitely don't need that one right now. Graduated filter and radial filter and adjustment brush, which the shortcut is K, which is exactly the same in Adobe Camera Raw. Alright, so let's do some adjusting. Firstly, let's have a look at the size of our brush. Yep, a little bit too small. I'm just going to go a little bit bigger. And the feather's already at 100, which is how I normally like to work it. Obviously, depending on the scenario, sometimes I drop the feather as well if I'm wanting to make a more defined adjustment. So I'm just going to increase that a tiny bit more. And what I'm going to do is drop the exposure by about 21. And let's just have a look at what that does. Beauty of this is that it's all non-destructive. So if, say for example, I'm not too keen on that one, I just click on it and delete, and that adjustment is gone. So that's obviously a perfect example of non-destructive editing. You can always remove those adjustments, particularly when it's a raw image. You can see the adjustments I'm making aren't huge, but they certainly are effective. You can see that effect coming in quite beautifully. Yep, that looks good. Happy with all of that. Yep, that's looking great. Now, over here on the tab where it shows all of the adjustments that we can apply with that adjustment brush, if you want to apply a new mask, you just simply click on new and that starts it again. A little bit different, but the same to Adobe Camera Raw, I guess. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with where that is at. That's looking really nice. Let me just make some further adjustments, a little bit more. What I am going to do is just go back up to my adjustment brush. I'm just going to reduce the size of the brush itself, put the exposure back to 0, and I'm just going to put a little bit of clarity and dehaze onto that adjustment brush, and I'm just going to paint in a little bit of that clarity and dehaze onto the actual peak itself. Yep, I'm really happy with that. That's giving me some solid results. And I'm just going to increase that exposure just a tiny bit again. It's always a bit of a delicate balancing act around where you want it to be and where it is. Alright, so for now I'd be very happy with that edit. There's maybe just a few other things that I would make changes for. So I just wanted to minimize that screen just to get a kind of uninhibited view of the mountain itself. Just feeling like that adjustment brush needs a little bit more attention. Just going to get rid of the clarity and dehaze. I just want to maybe drop the exposure a tiny bit through here. The next step of the process that I would obviously take, depending on what I wanted to do with the image, would be to print it. Because while, I could be happy with the image and how it's sitting on screen, the transfer to printing can often be a little bit different. Now, obviously, I'm working with a calibrated monitor, so what I'm looking at is what I will get in print. But our interaction with prints is different to interaction with an image on a screen. So if your intention is to print your images, my recommendation is to print your images. Print them to see how they look and how they feel under different light, where you're going to hang them, just how they look in general. Because obviously, as I said, the interaction with a print is very different to a digital image. So yeah, it's always worth doing. Do some test prints, and obviously if you need to make adjustments, then yes, make adjustments as you go. But in terms of how the image is looking at the moment, I'm pretty happy with that. I'd be quite happy to send that for a first test print. Alright, so as you can see with this image, it's been a fairly quick process. It hasn't been a long sort of drawn out edit and with a high level of complexity. One of the things that I am a big advocate for is getting an image capture as close to correct in camera as possible. There's a lot of flexibility in RAW for sure, and which is great, because it does give us that flexibility, which is the key word, obviously, in that statement. But I think having stuff correct in camera really gives you a good base and start for pushing your imaging to wherever you want to take it. Now, absolutely, the before and after of this image is very different, but the correct exposure that I shot at the time has allowed me to do that. So always try and get your image making correct or as close to correct in camera as possible. And don't take the approach or the belief that you can just fix it in post, because it can often be the case, but sometimes it isn't. And always you'll get a better result if you've started with a good clean exposure. Thanks again for stopping by. I hope this video has been helpful, and look forward to seeing you all in the future. As always, if you have any questions, pop them down in the comments below, and look forward to sending out the next video. Thanks very much, and take care.